All right, grab your hard hats and flashlights because we're about to dive deep, literally, into one of Paris's most fascinating, dark, and historically significant spots. It's a place where millions of Parisians are stacked, not in hotels, but in bone-filled corridors. And spoiler alert, these bones have been neatly arranged into eerie art. Yes, folks, we're talking about the Catacombs of Paris. But before we get to this chilling underground world, let's first take a step back to where it all began, the Holy Innocents Cemetery, where Paris got its first burial grounds and some major graveyard drama. Imagine this, Paris, in the 12th century, it's growing faster than a TikTok trend. And of course, people are dying. Shocking, I know. The Holy Innocents Cemetery was set up in 1130 to deal with the growing demand for burial space, and boy, did it get popular. The cemetery was not just a burial site, oh no. It was a prestigious resting place for the Parisian elite and the regular folk alike. If you were living in Paris, the Holy Innocents Cemetery was the place to be. If you were dead, of course. But just like your favorite coffee shop, the cemetery quickly became overcrowded. And we're talking really overcrowded, with no room for anyone else. The bones were so stacked, you could probably open your own DIY bone pyramid business. Now, with the Black Death rolling through Paris like the worst houseguest ever, the cemetery became ground zero for this deadly party. Thousands of plague victims piled in, and by the 14th century, the cemetery was practically a free-for-all burial ground, with graves stacked on top of graves, just waiting for a terrible health crisis to strike. In fact, at its peak, the cemetery had become so full, residents complained about the smell. Imagine living near a dead body warehouse. Oh wait, we don't have to imagine it. This place was ground zero for unsanitary conditions, and that's when the city decided to shut it down. But not before, letting things get a little too out of hand. By the 17th century, Paris was pushing a serious population crisis, like a subway at rush hour, but instead of people, it was dead bodies. Overcrowding was at an all-time high, and let's face it, if you're trying to rest in peace, you probably don't want 10,000 other bodies fighting for the same space. The cemetery was bursting at the seams with graves stacked upon graves, and no, this wasn't some weird, minimalist trend that would come to be appreciated centuries later by hipsters. No, this was serious, folks. As things went from bad to worse, the health issues were almost like an afterthought, until the decomposing bodies started seeping into the nearby water supply. So yeah, guess who got a bacterial party in their drinking water? The poor folks in the neighborhood were getting sick left and right, and there was no medicine for the situation. With rotting corpses, foul odors, and the not-so-pleasant surprise of plague, the government finally had enough and decided to move the dead, which, let's be honest, was kind of like moving out of a haunted apartment, but much, much worse. Enter King Louis XVI. Yes, that Louis, the one who might have had poor timing and a terrible headgear choice. By 1780, it was clear that the whole overcrowded cemetery situation had spiraled into a health crisis. Louis had to act fast, or else his reign was going to be remembered not for his glorious contributions, but for being the king who let the dead pile up like a horror show. So what did he do? He did what any king with a serious overcrowding problem would do. He decided to put the bodies in underground tunnels. I mean, sure, why not throw them in a huge, creepy catacomb beneath Paris? Very classy, Louis. And that's exactly what happened. The remains from the Holy Innocents Cemetery and other Parisian burial sites were transferred to the Catacombs, an underground tunnel network that was originally created for limestone quarrying, because apparently Paris was all about mining before it got really obsessed with food and fashion. Now, as you can imagine, the public wasn't exactly thrilled about having millions of bodies moved underground. But hey, the Catacombs became a solution, even though the whole thing was like moving your dead relatives to a storage unit. Only this one had skulls hanging on the walls. Okay, let's cut to the chase. The Catacombs of Paris, 6 million bones. And yes, it's basically Paris's underground mall of death, but without the shopping carts. These catacombs are now the most macabre museum in Paris, where bones are stacked in intricate patterns like something straight out of a horror movie. Except this is real life. Forget about medieval France and think about the intricacy of modern art, but with bones. I know what you're thinking. Do I really want to walk around with the remains of dead people surrounding me? And the answer is, well, yes, because the history here is pretty incredible, and let's be real, you'd probably do it for the Instagram story. People from all over the world come to the catacombs to see the bones of the past displayed in elaborate artistic arrangements. It's the ultimate in Gothic chic. Skulls stacked in a beautiful way that might make you want to take a picture, but also wonder, what did I just step on? This spooky underground labyrinth has evolved into a tourist attraction that has an eerie vibe, yet the artistry in the bone arrangements is just enough to make you say, I can't look away. And the best part? The Paris catacombs are like the underground Vegas, where once you're in, you can't just go halfway. You're stuck in a maze of mystery with absolutely no way out unless you follow the exact path laid out by the authorities, or risk becoming a permanent part of the ossuary yourself. The Paris catacombs didn't just sit there in all their spooky glory, they also doubled as mushroom farms. Oh yeah, forget about being a spooky crypt during the 19th century. Mushrooms were grown in the damp, dark environment of the catacombs. These fungi thrived where light and air feared to tread. So, while the catacombs are haunted by history, they also fed Paris, which just shows the adaptability of mushrooms. Paris made sure that in a city full of fancy food, nothing went to waste. It's like Paris said, why not grow mushrooms in a creepy underground labyrinth? Because Paris. Fast forward to World War II, and guess what? The catacombs became the ultimate hiding spot for the French resistance. Who would have thought that the ultimate underground lair wasn't just for bones, but for defying the Nazis? While German soldiers were marching above ground, the resistance fighters were below, plotting their counterattacks, keeping the spirit of freedom alive in the cool, damp tunnels. Now, isn't that a plot twist? From mushrooms to rebels, the catacombs just keep showing up in history in the most unexpected ways. Now let's talk about mushrooms. Yes, mushrooms, but not the kind that grow in your backyard after a rainy day. I'm talking about the kind that grew in the catacombs of Paris. You see, Paris has always had a knack for turning the weirdest things into business opportunities. So, when the 19th century came rolling around, and Paris had its vast underground tunnels full of cool, damp, dark spaces, the city decided to make some money off the dead. The catacombs became the go-to underground farming space where mushrooms were cultivated like prime real estate. Think about it for a second. Where else could you grow mushrooms without worrying about the sun getting in the way? It was a win-win situation. The mushrooms grew like crazy in these ideal conditions, and Paris made some extra cash while at it. Imagine that, from death to delicious dinner, all thanks to Paris's underground innovation. Not exactly Gordon Ramsay-level farming, but hey, it worked. And let's be honest, it sounds pretty cool to say, hey, I'm off to check on my underground mushroom farm. But of course, the real kicker here is that Paris wasn't just growing any mushrooms, they were growing mushrooms for the city's elite restaurants. Gourmet mushrooms grown in a place full of death. And we thought our food came from some random farmer's market, right? The Parisian catacombs proved that sometimes the darkest places can create the finest things. Now let's talk about some serious action, because we can't just leave the catacombs as some spooky mushroom-filled tomb. Oh no, These tunnels became a battlefield for freedom during World War II. While the Nazis were busy trying to take over Europe, the French resistance was like, not so fast, and used the catacombs as their underground hideout, their secret lair, their freedom fighter headquarters. It's basically the real-life version of every action movie you've ever seen, except with more bones. The resistance used the catacombs to hide from the Nazis, move supplies, and even smuggle people out of danger. Imagine dodging Nazis in the streets of Paris, only to escape into an underground maze of tunnels. It's like the ultimate game of hide and seek, only way more high stakes. They had secret meetings, stored weapons, and hid out from the enemy down there. If that doesn't sound like a Hollywood blockbuster, I don't know what does. And all the while, there were 6 million bones watching them from the walls, kind of like the most macabre security system ever. There's something about the idea of rebels hiding under Paris, plotting freedom, while bones line the walls that's just too cool to ignore. So, the next time you think about the catacombs, remember, they're not just some spooky place to visit. They were once a sanctuary for resistance against a brutal regime. History never looked so cool. All right, now we're diving deep into the party scene. And I'm not talking about your typical DJ spinning tracks at the local nightclub. Nope, we're talking underground, people. Picture this, the catacombs, dark and eerie, with bones stacked in intricate patterns around you, the ultimate VIP venue. And if you think that sounds like the perfect place for a spooky rave, you'd be right. Over the years, the catacombs have turned into one of the coolest and creepiest party venues around. From underground concerts to art exhibits, the catacombs have hosted more events than most nightclubs. Imagine walking into a space lit by candles, with the world's most artistic bone arrangements staring back at you. Sounds like something out of a gothic movie, doesn't it? But these gatherings didn't come without some serious underground flair. People would sneak into the catacombs through hidden doors, and you'd think you were attending some exclusive Parisian event, except this one had a lot more bones and a lot less champagne. Some of the parties got so wild that they even got attention from the authorities. Yes, imagine Parisian police looking for underground raves while they're walking through a dark tunnel full of skulls and finding more than just rebellious teens. In fact, many of these underground events were so secretive and exclusive that they became almost like a symbol of defiance, a place where art and freedom met in the most creepy way possible. But of course, not every underground party stays a secret. These illegal events eventually caught the attention of the law, and now the catacombs are officially off-limits for most gatherings, unless you're approved, of course. But the fact that these underground spaces were once home to some of Paris's wildest and most exclusive parties just adds another layer to the myth of the catacombs. So, when you visit, just imagine how many rock stars, artists, and underground rebels have walked these eerie corridors before you. Who knows? The ghosts of those parties might still be lingering, dancing with the skeletons. So, as we wrap up this eerie journey through Paris's bones, remember that the catacombs are not just a spooky tourist attraction. They are a living testament to the city's resilience, its adaptability, and its quirky habit of turning the weirdest things into art. From their humble beginnings as a solution to overcrowded cemeteries to becoming a home for mushrooms, rebels, and partygoers, the catacombs are a multi-layered symbol of Paris's history. We've explored how the catacombs have been home to 6 million Parisians' bones, how they turned into a mushroom farm, how they were used as secret lairs by the French resistance, and even how they hosted wild underground raves. This underground labyrinth has seen it all, and it continues to capture the imagination of adventurers, historians, and anyone brave enough to venture into the dark depths. Next time you're in Paris, why not ditch the Eiffel Tower selfie and make your way down to one of the creepiest places on Earth? Just make sure you don't get lost in the tunnels, because while they may have the art of bones and the flair of adventure, you definitely don't want to run into the wrong crowd. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with all your friends who love exploring the creepy corners of history. Paris has more secrets than any tourist guide can reveal, and we're here to keep unearthing them.